So are we about ready to start, I think? Okay, well, so hopefully if there are people owing, they'll come and join us. But I'm David, I'm Vice Chair of Glasgow Moving. I joined in 2020 and yeah, it's been a wild ride. It was really great for COP last year and we've got lots going on, so it's brilliant to have you with us. My fellow board members are Susan in the chat, so anyone who's got CM in front of their name is part of the committee. So we've got Susan, Brenda, Gavin, who else? We've got others. But yeah, you'll see them in the chat with the CM. So we are a volunteer-run campaign, and we will be approving the 2022 committee at the end of tonight's meeting. So I was going to ask you to introduce yourselves in the chat, but you've already done that. That's really brilliant. Thank you for your interaction. That's fantastic. Really pleased to have you with us. Just to say though that from last year's AGM that there are no minutes, but the meeting was recorded and that's available for you to view, and we'll put that in the chat, the link in the chat for you. Just to let you know that we will be recording tonight's meeting, so it won't be made public, but it will be made available for you to view. But if you don't want to appear in the recording, please just switch off your camera and that's not a problem. We do encourage you to keep them on though, because it's nice to see your faces if you're able, but if not, that's no problem. And our agenda tonight, we're going to be having introductions, then we're going to go to the chair's report, then membership report, go into how you can help us in 2022, a treasurer's report, and then the approval of committee members for 2022. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Ellie. Ellie, over to you.
Thanks very much, David, and welcome everybody. It's great to see such a good turnout. So yeah, I'm Ellie Harrison. I'm one of the co-founders of Get Glasgow Moving. We were set up in 2016 and we were formally constituted in January 2019 at our first AGM. So the report is chronological, going through 2021, which was another incredibly busy year for us, in part because of the number of consultations around transport policy happening, but also, of course, because of COP26. So, as always, we have been engaged in our campaigning at a local level, so lobbying Glasgow City Council, at regional level, lobbying SPT and the Glasgow City Region Cabinet, and at a national level, lobbying the Scottish Government. And this year, I'd also say that we kind of went UK-wide with the work that we did with Philip Alston, and also we went international because of that work with Philip Alston, which I'll talk about shortly, but because of the global exposure that we got as a result of COP26. So the report starts where my last report at last year's AGM left off, and that is with the consultation, first of many consultations that Glasgow City Council was doing on their climate emergency implementation plan last January. So I guess we were in the middle of a lockdown back then. So most of our activities were conducted online, and we mobilised our supporters to respond to this consultation. We were particularly interested in it because Get Glasgow Moving was one of the groups that sat on the Climate Emergency Working Group, which put forward the recommendations, which then went into this plan. And a lot of our recommendations were either watered down or rejected. So we were really angry about this, wrote a very lengthy response, which is on our website, and encouraged you guys and our big supporter network to do the same. Next up, we began work preparing for our AGM, which happens in February every year. And we managed to secure a very high profile guest for the public meeting that we did preceding the AGM. and that was Philip Alston, the former UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights. A lot of you, I imagine, were there this time last year. And at that time, Philip was working with his colleagues at New York University School of Law on a report into the human rights impacts of the deregulation and privatization of buses. So exactly what Ray was talking about at the beginning. So we heard from Philip, we heard from his colleague Bassam at that meeting, as well as from Fran Postlethwaite, who's from the Better Buses for South Yorkshire campaign, about their fight for public control of their bus network in South Yorkshire. We had a huge amount of interest as a result of this event, and a lot of expectation building up to the release of Philip Alston's report, which happened later in the year. So I'll come back to that. We decided to launch an action to coincide with that. This photograph was taken in 2020, not during the lockdown, outside SPT's offices. But this action we launched was to encourage people to write to their councillors to say we need to regulate the buses and not to settle for a partnership with the private bus companies, which is basically going to be maintaining the status quo. And this, yeah, I'll be coming back to this as I go through. But sticking to chronological order, in March, we worked with Free Our City, which is a coalition that Glasgow Moving is like a lead partner in with the Glasgow Trades Council, to put on an event targeting the climate emergency implementation plan and the fact that the council had removed the ambition to work towards a public transport network that's free for all. So this was really saying what you need to put that ambition back in the plan. And that was a very well attended event, and I think Gavin's going to post a link to the recording of it in the chat. It was a public hearing, so we heard from representatives from about 20 different community organisations, different walks of life, explaining how free public transport would improve their quality of life. And for Get Glasgow Moving, it's always been really important for us to link free public transport as an ambition in this route map, that we need to regulate the buses, we need to bring the costs under control, we need to bring more of our network into public ownership, and it's so then that we can roll out free public transport in a cost-effective way. Otherwise, we're just writing a blank check to private operators, which is what the Scottish Government's doing at the moment with its extended concessionary card scheme. In March, we had two good pieces of news for the campaign. So on the 17th of March, Michael Matheson, Transport Secretary, announced he would bring ScotRail back into public ownership from this April. So we'll be looking forward to that this April and seeing whether it makes a positive difference. And this followed the launch of, or the relaunch of, this petition that we did in April 2020 during the first lockdown with Bring Back British and the TSA, We Own It. And when Michael Matheson announced that he was going to bring ScotRail back into public ownership, he said that this would provide better value for passengers because it would effectively cut out the company, which has been running the system. In that case, it's Abellio, which is owned by the Dutch state, and including that company's considerable management costs. So he was making the case that public ownership would be much more efficient use of public transport, but unfortunately, public money, but unfortunately that logic has not carried on through to the buses yet. In March, we also had the good piece of news that Manchester have made the decision to re-regulate their bus network. So they're going to be the first UK city to do this since the buses were deregulated in 1986. Gavin's going to post a link to this blog post that we put up, basically just highlighting what Manchester is doing and comparing the powers that we have in Scotland under the Transport Act and what we now need to do to follow Manchester's lead. And we've been trying to create as much awareness for what Manchester and Liverpool as well are doing in Scotland. So that's March. in April, this is a slide from the Glasgow Bus Alliance, the bus companies' bus partnership that they've set up. So we think that they're running scared at the thought of being regulated, and that would cut into their profits. So they formed this alliance, which was announced last April. This is something that we, absolutely slammed in an article with the Glasgow Times. And you can see this repeated in Manchester. When there was a campaign to regulate the buses in Manchester, all the bus companies in Manchester got together and said, we can do this so much better in a partnership. But it's basically all propaganda, and that's what we need to fight against. Oh God, there's so much. Just to mention this briefly, the STPR2, which some of you may have heard of, is another Transport Scotland thing that's ongoing, which the Clyde Metro proposal has resulted from. So there's currently a consultation on the Clyde Metro, and we'll no doubt be in touch with you about responding to that. That's the third consultation on this STPR. We did one in 2019 and we did one last year as well, and this is the third one. So it is quite exhausting, but eventually we may get, hopefully, to some serious investment in improving Glasgow's public transport network. So we support the Clyde Metro, but also linked to this is the proposal for bus partnerships, which we obviously think will be a disaster and would actually undermine any investment in the metro. If you couldn't integrate the buses with that system, then there's very little point spending a lot of money on it, because obviously buses reach so many more people and cover so much more of the region. Okay, May 2021 was our Scottish Parliament election campaign. I don't know if Suze is here, but we met an animator at one of our campaign meetings who said that she would make a film for us for free because she wanted to support the campaign, which kind of explains sort of the history of transport policy in Glasgow and explains what we need to do to sort it out. It's a fantastic film. We've remade it now in the run-up to the local elections, but this is when we first launched that ahead of the Scottish parliamentary elections, just trying to get MSP candidates to talk more about this issue and to get the funding necessary from the Scottish Government to be able to use the powers to re-regulate the buses. In June, we did an action with Free Our City on George Square. This was our first live protest for, I can't even remember, like well over a year because of the lockdown. So we all got our face mask on there, but this was a success because the pressure from the public hearing that we did and the lobbying around the climate emergency implementation plan paid off, and that ambition to transition to a free public transport system is still in the climate plan. So that was a big success. A few days later, we had to respond to SPT's consultation on the regional transport strategy. So you may have received an email about this, but we're really lobbying SPT to raise its game. You know, it is our regional transport authority. It is the one that should be taking a lead on seizing the powers in the Transport Act to regulate the buses and to set up a new publicly owned bus company for the region. Then we came around to the launch of Philip Alston's report, which was very exciting. And this was a collaboration with campaigns across the UK. So it's fantastic to work with campaigns in South Yorkshire, Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire, the Association of British Commuters, and to do it with an online event, which some of you may have attended, which Philip Alston spoke at and Bassam Khawaja spoke at to launch the report. Gavin's going to post a link to the report in the chat. It came out in July last year. Public transport, private profit, the cost of privatising buses in the United Kingdom. So this is a kind of external view because they're looking at UK policy from America, and they conclude that the report is a damning indictment of Britain's extreme form of privatisation and deregulation, which they describe as a 35-year masterclass in how not to run a bus service. So this is like brilliant evidence for backing up the campaign. And the conclusion is that partnerships are a tried and failed approach that should be retired in favour of actual regulation of public transport. So yeah, it's this brilliant evidence. If you ever want to to bring somebody round to these arguments, send them a link to this report. That got a lot of press attention last summer. Straight after that had been launched, we started working with the STUC and trying to expand the Glasgow campaign across the whole of Scotland, and getting more local trades councils on board, campaigning locally from parts of Scotland for the powers in the Transport Act to be used. So that became the Our Climate, Our Buses campaign, which was launched in August. And the early part of the campaign, we were actually lobbying Transport Scotland because they had opened a consultation on implementing the bus powers in the Transport Act. And we were lobbying them directly. And we want to make sure that the powers that will become available this year, they've been incredibly delayed because of COVID, that those powers are workable and affordable for local authorities or regional transport authorities to be able to use. So that means curbing the power of the bus companies and bus industry insiders have in determining transport policy. And it also means backing up the powers with the funding that's necessary to be able to use them. So we did a lot of work around the consultation. The deadline was the 6th of October. And we also commissioned the Association of British Commuters, Emily Yates, who some of you will remember spoke at our AGM in 2020, to write a kind of expose on Scottish transport policy, comparing it to England's and showing how in many cases it's actually worse. So this is a big embarrassment for the Scottish government and trying to get them to raise their game. We were also invited to write an opinion piece for the National around the time of the SNP conference, which was really good for raising the profile of that campaign. And then we went into COP26. And it was really fantastic organising for COP26 because we were approached by the ITF, which is the International Federation of Transport Unions across the world, and the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. Obviously, a lot of global interest on Glasgow in the run up to COP. So they got in touch with us about putting on events, like collaborating to put on events. So we had quite a few meetings with those organisations. One's based in London, the other's based in Brussels. To organise, we ended up organising 8 events and actions during COP, including this event, Transforming Public Transport to Fight Climate Change, which was our first in-person event, in-person indoor event for a very long time, for about a year and a half at Govan Hill Bars. Sorry, not at Govan Hill Bars, at the Deep End in Govan Hill, because Govan Hill Bars is shut. So that was really fantastic. We only had a small capacity, but it was really great to get people in the same room together. We took our banner on the Youth Climate Strike March, and then on the Global Day of Action, where we kind of brought our bike bus, which I haven't actually mentioned, but you can see it in the background there, and some of you will have seen it in real life, which we did mention at last year's AGM actually, because it was made at the end of 2020. So this is the gang in Kelvin Grove Park, and that's us heading through Finnieston. There's the bike bus if you haven't seen it before. There's Miles in the front, who's on our committee, who's standing down. Hopefully he's here tonight, but just want to give a big shout out to him because he's done such amazing work. And there we are in Glasgow Green, along about 4 hours after we set off. Then a couple of days later, we spoke at an event on campaigns for greener transport at the Governor Lindhouse Parish Church. That was an STUC organised event. And then we organised our own demo in George Square on the COP's Transport Day. So this was quite epic. There we all are, and we had a really amazing turnout. I think the biggest turnout we've had for any demo that we've done. And of course, it's interest in public transport during the COP because of the scandal around the travel pass. And you'll probably all know that the delegates to the COP were given free multimodal travel passes. And we've got a big replica of one in the middle there. And yeah, so there was a huge amount of press attention throughout the whole of the COP. And we helped to whip that up as much as we could. Oh, I should just say this tweet, we were very lucky in that this was retweeted by Naomi Klein during the COP. So got a huge amount of reach. And we also, this is our most viral tweet of last year around these private eye articles that were written. Basically, exposing the scandal of the COP delegates being given these free multimodal travel passes. So that one really whipped up a big controversy. That was before the COP on the 17th of October. And they did a follow-up in a subsequent edition, actually, that was after the COP, which we were actually quoted in. So our Twitter following grew by more than 600, so 630 followers during COP, which is quite epic, because normally we only get about 20 to 30 new followers a month. So the exposure was really huge for the campaign. As if we weren't exhausted enough at the end of that, Glasgow City Council decided to do another consultation on its local transport strategy in December. So we attended loads of events, consultation events with them, and then mobilized, wrote our own response, and then tried to get you guys to also respond to that. I'm sure a lot of you did. And finally, just before Christmas, we wanted to launch our campaign in the run up to the local elections. So as I mentioned before, we re-edited the animation about Glasgow's buses, why they're so expensive and unreliable, and what we need to do to sort out the mess. So hopefully you've all watched this film, but Gavin's going to post a link in the chat, because it's linked to an online tool which enables you to email your councillors. And if you haven't emailed your councillors yet, I absolutely need to do that. We made this film with the STUC, and we also made a film for Aberdeen and for Dundee. So maybe, I think it's Andrew and Radine was saying they're from Dundee. If you want to mobilise anyone you know in Dundee behind this film, we want all those three big city regions to also get grassroots campaigns off the ground, similar to ours, to increase pressure on the Scottish Government. So please email your councillors. I think Gavin's going to put the link in the chat, and we've also now set up an online tool so that you can tweet your councillors. And this was an enormous amount of work, because we're trying to cover the entire Glasgow City region, which is 8 council areas. And there's something like 300 to 400 councillors in those 8 councils. So David and Miles researched every single councillor's email address and Twitter handle, so we could set up this page which would enable people to really easily just find their councillors, click on the link. If you're on Twitter, please do this, because being them to put pressure on, but we also need to be tweeting them, because that's public, and it's just circulating the film and getting the word out there, and also, you know, putting pressure on them to make a public response as well. Finally, you should all have had an email about this, but we're doing our first campaigning day this Saturday. We hope you'll all come down and pick up some of the leaflets which are hot off the press. So we've actually only got 5,000, but we're going to get another 5,000 done. So we really want to get these out all across the city region. They're this QR code takes you to the film, so you can watch the film straight away, and then click on the link to email your councillors. And it's just about putting as much pressure on them as possible to say, yes, we're going to commit to this in our manifesto election. One last thing, shout out, also to look forward to in April. I have personally got funding to put on an event called Bus Regulation the Musical, which I did in Manchester in 2019. I've been trying to fundraise for it for 2 years, and I finally got the funding through. So this is going to happen in April as well, and you'll all get more information about that nearer the time. And that is the romp through last year's activities. Apologies if that was a long time, but there was a lot to cover. I'm now going to hand over to Susan to talk about our membership and how that's grown.
Thanks, Ellie. I feel even more exhausted after listening to that than I did after doing a lot of it. But anyway, just like to welcome all the new members that I can see have come along tonight, and also new affiliates. Really glad to see you too. And I mean, the big success of 2020 was the big growth in our membership, and I'm glad to see that that continued last year, and that was reflected in our income, as I'll tell you about later. But we've currently got 174 paid members of Get Glasgow Moving. A year ago, we had 119, so our membership has grown by almost 50% in 2021. And it's no surprise that we got a lot of those members during COP with all the activity that we did around there that Ellie's just spoken about, but also in the run up to this AGM as well. And with that growth in membership, it's not just in Glasgow, but we've also got members in a lot of neighbouring local authorities as well. So South Lanarkshire, Renfrewshire, East Renfrewshire, West Dunbartonshire, North and South Ayrshire, we've got members in, as well as further afield. And that is really important, as Ellie said, because we are a regional campaign, not just for Glasgow. And within Glasgow, our members are now spread right across the city. That didn't used to be the case, but I mean, we've now got concentrations of members in Maryhill, Possil, Govan, Cardonald and Ibrox, Partick and Scotstoun, all over the south side, Cathcart, Pollokshields, Shawlands, Mount Florida, Govan Hill, the city centre. Not so many in the East End, but we have got members in Cranhill, Bridgeton, Denison, Baillieston. So we really are a really strong citywide and increasingly a region-wide, we hope, campaign. And one of our main goals for 2021 was to increase the members' participation and involvement in the active campaigning that we do. It's really important. We've got new members, but we need to mobilise them as well, as Ellie said. We did a membership survey in April, and we got a really good response, and 90% of members felt that we kept them up to date and with campaign news, and that they felt involved, which is good to hear. And we have kept in touch frequently with members, as I hope you have noticed since last year. I mean, we've been in touch with members by email 19 times over the year, and a lot of those have been trying to encourage you to get involved in helping us, writing to councillors, MSPs, taking part in the consultations. And that really does, we know that really does make help make us more of an impact. We started having members meetings last year. We had a couple of them. The first one was in June on the subject of bus franchising, explaining what that is, with Matthew Topham from the Better Buses for Greater Yorkshire campaign. And we held another members meeting in September to talk people through what the powers were in the new Bus Act and how members could reply to the Transport Scotland consultation. And as Ellie said, there's been loads of other public events and meetings during the year that members could get involved in. We use a platform called Slack for members to talk to each other, discuss things, share campaign information, news and so on. And more members have been using that during the last year. I think it's still something that we could develop more. We also, last year, we did look at the possibility of where we have got members in neighbouring authorities, to see whether we could support them to begin to set up local campaigns around specific transport issues in those areas. That didn't quite get off the ground, but as Ellie said, we did write to all the local trades councils across Scotland during the summer to ask if they were interested in getting involved in a campaign for publicly owned buses. And that's led to contacts with some of you being here now representing several trades councils tonight. So Cumbernauld and Kilsyth are here, Clydebank, I think North Lanarkshire as well. And that's really important, I think, an important addition to the campaigning that we're going to do in the run up to the local elections, and also helping us get that region-wide activity going as well. We really do need to take the campaign out to local communities. We really do need to be visible and have a profile so that local councillors and the transport leads in local councils start to sit up and take notice and feel a bit of pressure from below, that there is an expectation and a demand to get buses sorted. They haven't been feeling that so far, and that's why the stuff we're doing around Twitter and the email campaign with the STUC is so important. We need to get people involved in that. And the leaflet that we've just produced for the local elections, it's got a direct QR code that takes people, when we're giving these out in the street, we can get people to scan the QR code and email their councillors right away on the spot, if they've got an update, of course. So we want to expand that kind of work in the run up to the elections. We can't be a public transport campaign without mobilising the public. And so it's great that you all want to be involved, and that's what we want to talk about next, is what you can do in the coming months. So thanks very much, and happy to take any questions or whatever.
Thanks, Susan. That was fantastic. We'll come to questions in a second. I posted a couple of links in the chat as you were speaking. So one is to a video. This is a slide of showing what the Slack portal looks like, which is our kind of online members forum. If you're new to Slack, then please watch the video which Miles made. It will give you a little introduction to how it works. But this is really where if you want to find out what's going on, get on the Slack, because this is where we're publishing updates. Any documents that we're getting hold of. I published one today actually about this scoping study that's just been published by SPT. It all goes on here, and there's lots of discussion, and yeah, I really recommend it. And if we get more members on here from across the region, then we may think about, you know, having different regional channels on here, so that people from Renfrewshire or from Inverclyde or from any other council areas could organise through this locally as well. So I just wanted to flag that up. But coming on to how you can help in 2022, this is reiterating a lot of what we've covered. But the number one thing to do is email your councillors if you haven't done already. As Susan said, there's an online tool. It literally takes 2 minutes. Just put your postcode in and it will pull up the councillors' names. Gavin's going to put that in the link for you, a link in the chat again for you. He's also going to post a link to the Twitter thing. If you are on Twitter, please make sure you do that as well. And then finally, if you really want to heap on the pressure, go and meet your councillors too at the local surgeries. I'm not sure if surgeries are happening online at the moment, but I think some are happening in person, especially when you've got hold of a copy of our leaflet, which just arrived from the printers today, by the way. But yeah, once you've got hold of a copy of that, you can take that along to your councillor and say, what are you doing about this? Because all the details you need are on there. And then, as it says there, we need to repeat the 1, 2, 3 again in March when we've got our list of candidates announced for the elections. So at the moment, we're lobbying existing councillors, but they are subject to change because they may not all be standing again for the election. So we're going to update the online tool and the Twitter list potentially. Haven't told David about that yet, but we're going to be researching the Twitter handles for 400 candidates as well, so that we can start lobbying them. Then obviously attender, if you're available, please come along on Saturday. We're going to be meeting, hopefully, fingers crossed, for better weather, 1 o'clock in St Enoch Square. We're going to have a massive box of leaflets. You can take as many as you want back to your local areas and organise your own campaigning days. So we really recommend you just come down and grab the leaflets. They're hot off the press and we need to get them out there. And now we're opening up for questions. I can see Janet is got her hand out, but David, you're going to chair the discussion.
Yeah, sorry, I was just finding my unmute button. Yeah, Janet, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, we just had a trade council meeting on Monday night, and I don't know if any of you are aware, but the Clydebank Health Centre, the new one, has just opened on Monday. Now, it's been really well organised. They've got big paint marks on the road, bus stop, no bus stops, no buses. And our councillors and our local CLP they're getting involved in it. But when they approached the bus companies, it was a case of, well, it's only a 5-minute walk from the bus station. Now, that's okay if you're able-bodied. If you're elderly, infirm, or you've got a couple of kids holding on your coattails, you know, it's impossible. So we're in a quandary. What can we do, really?
Yeah, we have heard of that. Ellie, did you want to approach that?
Well, I know, so Susan, you've been looking at that specific case, haven't you? But I think, Janet, it is one of these things, like in the short term, anything SPT does is just going to be papering over the cracks. Like, it's very difficult to get them to put on a service, because those are the subsidised services, and that's a considerable cost to them. Meanwhile, all the profitable services are all the profits being taken out the system by the private bus companies. So I think in the short term, a campaign specifically around that can create awareness. But I think, you know, the answer has to be that all the buses are regulated and that they're planned to serve our needs and the needs of the communities, and not just determined by wherever the bus companies can make the most money. So that would be my response. But
yeah, but I think also it's a case to get as many people to email their councillors and tweet as possible. So yeah, definitely spread the word on that, because it's not good enough. Definitely not good enough. I did see Dave's hand come up. Did you want to answer a point on that, Dave, Sherry?
Thanks, Chair. No, I just wanted to make a point about the trade unions and how we could maybe expand our influence and publicity there. Somebody posted in the chat they were amazed at Ellie's presentation about how much we've done, and I think it's impressive as well. I think the COP26 stuff and the fact that it was delayed for a year has had a big impact in the campaign and helped the campaign to develop, because actually I mean, COP26 itself was a cop-out. I mean, it did nothing, but what it did do was put the movement back in the streets and develop local activities in Glasgow, not just in terms of transport, but like housing retrofit and stuff like that. And I think it all ties together. And I think there's a greater thirst in the trade unions for doing something about it, not just like at the level of the STUC and at trades councils and so on, and, you know, the activists in the unions, but a wider layer of people in the unions. And I think it's quite important we get the material that Ellie's talking about it and get it out to members, ordinary members of trade unions. And one of the things, I mean, I know, for example, Ellie spoke at our branch meeting and went down very well. And I think we should try and get our members to get invites to union Zoom meetings and union meetings when they come up. even maybe workplaces, because it affects people getting to and from work. The buses go off at night, basically under private ownership. I mean, I remember when the old Glasgow Corpay bus service, it wasn't perfect, but there was buses all the time, all night, everywhere. And that's deteriorated rapidly. So I'm really pleased that I've been involved in the campaign for a while. I've been along to a lot of meetings, but I want to get more involved in activity. I think the thing on Saturday is a good idea. And I think we should be trying to take it into, not just in Glasgow, but in local areas, onto the streets, round the doors, get people involved. Because it's something, actually, with austerity hitting and the cost of living stuff going up, people are getting smashed in every direction, whether it's their heating bills, whether it's transport, whether it's food. And actually, I'm in favour of free public transport. I think it makes sense. But I mean, even if we could get the fares capped, that would be a hit. And I think that would be attractive to people. So I think it's really good to see that there's been campaigns being launched. We should use the council elections to do that as well. But I think a great way of doing it would be through trade union organisations. And the other side of that is, if we're doing a lot of publicity and producing a lot of materials, unions can provide, local union branches have funds and can provide finance and affiliate to the campaign. So I'd make a plea for that as well. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dave. I think you've laid out the case well there, really, that, we need to be more focused and targeted. And that's one of the things that we have been speaking about within the committee. I did also see in the chat that we've got someone from Strathclyde University, I think it's Rory. Again, I think that getting the student bodies involved as well in terms of their, what they can put towards it, I think that's also another area that we need to go. I will come to you, Rory. I'm just going to go in order of hands up. Is that okay? Thank you. Andy, you're next. If you put the cursor over your picture and it should say unmute in blue, and then click that. There you go. I can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Well, it was more just a quick comment. As I said, I'm representing Cumbernauld Trades Council, and Cumbernauld, like a lot of areas outside Glasgow, is blighted by poor, very expensive bus services, inaccessible train services, rural areas around Cumbernauld Cliffside with really poor links, continuing issues over years about difficult public transport access to Monklands Hospital in Airdrie. I'm sure probably replicated in other areas as well. We're keen to have a campaign event in Cumbernauld in advance of the elections, around the council elections. One of the issues that's been highlighted in Cumbernauld, which I'm sure people are aware of, although we've not mentioned it tonight, is about the train station ticket offices and ticketing staff, etc. I think Cumbernauld is one of 104 stations that are having their services cut. I think we're going from 49 hours presence of ticket offices to only 9 hours a week is the cuts that Cumbernauld being marked for, which isn't, as we know, isn't just about ticket offices. It's also about maintenance of train stations, about safety issues, etc. for passengers. It was announced, we were aware of it just after, ironically, just after COP26, and I know there was some local activity in Cumbernauld in raising the hypocrisy of these cuts coming just after COP26, when we should be making public transport more attractive. But I'm sure that's an issue. I'm sure that's an issue that yourselves are all familiar with. But we'd really look forward to support from yourselves in maybe doing a local campaign. Cheers,
yeah,
thanks.
Thanks so much, Andy. I think you're right. Yeah, definitely. We should definitely connect and discuss that for the future before the elections. Okay, I'm going to go to Brenda and then Rory, and then if it's all right with everybody, we'll move on after that.
Hi, I really just had a couple of comments for Janet, because am I right, Janet, that there is quite quite a well-read local paper in Clydebank.
Yeah, and there's been quite a bit written in it.
Right, I was going to say that's the first thing, because I did wonder if you could get a few people to stand in front of the new centre, the new health centre, you know, obviously standing at the non-existent bus stop, and get a photographer there from the local paper and a journalist doing a wee follow-up if they've already done it, and then try and get them to ask the local councillor and also the prospective candidates what they think about that and what their ideas about what could be done. I think we need to start putting the politicians into a more difficult space than they have been. I think they've been getting away with an awful lot, and that just sounds like an ideal situation to put them in a difficult place where they may have to come up with some ideas. That was all.
Thank you,
And
Brenda.
good luck.
That's great, thank you. And then Rory?
Yeah, cheers. And thanks for mentioning the student union involvement, which I think is something that's really important. I'm co-secretary of the Glasgow Student Forum, as well as being the Vice President of Community at the Strathclyde Student Union. And the Glasgow Student Forum is a group of officers from student unions across the Glasgow area, from colleges and universities. And the big focus this year has been on a campaign for better public transport. I think might have been in contact with you previously. I'm not 100% sure, but I was. We've got plans to host some sort of hustings session type thing before the council elections. We've actually got a couple of members of the group who are going to be running for election in that. But is that something you've got plans to do? Anything similar to that? Would you be interested in being involved in that event that we run?
Yeah, I think definitely. Yeah, Ellie, you want to speak? Don't you? I can see
We
you
were
want to speak.
actually going to highlight hustings as something that we're planning to do in the run up to the election, but it could make sense to collaborate, because it would, you know, it's a lot of work to organise that, and yeah, so let's keep chatting either on Slack or come along on Saturday, and same goes for Janet as well. If you can make it on Saturday, it would be great to chat face to face about the plans, because I was thinking we could take a bike bus out to Clydebank maybe. I don't know how practical that would be, but it would make an impact.
No, that's great, thank you.
David, can I just say to Ellie, they might tell us to get on my bike.
Active travel, that's what it's all about. Okay. I've got where are we now? Okay, so yeah, now we've done the how you can help in 2022. That was really brilliant. Thank you all for your input. I really appreciate it. And actually, it's quite exciting, really thinking about what we can all do together. I'm just going to move on now to the approval of committee members for 2022. Oh no, it's sorry, Treasurer's report. Sorry, Treasurer's report, and then approval of committee members. Thank you.
Great, so thanks very much. Back to me again. Do you want to move the slide? So I'll just quickly run through our accounts for last year. So if you see there, we started 2021 with a balance of just over £10,000. Most of that was the remainder of a grant of £30,000 that we received in 2019 from the Foundation for Integrated Transport, and that allowed us to employ a campaign worker for a period of time. And that's the remainder of that grant, which we still have and have been unable to spend for the past 2 years of COVID, because we've not been able to do the campaigning that we would have wanted to. Our total income last year was £2,626, and you can see that all of that was from membership fees. So reflecting just how much our membership has grown, if you compare that to last year, our membership income was up by about 40%. On the expenditure side, we spent a total of £1,938, mostly on campaigning costs and things that Ellie has already spoken about in the report. The exception to that is we were charged £220 fees by Go Cardless for the processing of membership income through our website. And that's a reason why it makes sense for those members who are paying monthly to the campaign. It would make a lot of sense for them to have a standing order instead, and that's something we might try and encourage them to do this year. You'll see that we spent £168 on Facebook advertising and promotion, particularly around COP, but also around this AGM. We do keep a close eye on whether that's worthwhile, because we don't particularly like handing over money to big, huge corporations, but we try and keep that to a minimum. Ellie mentioned that we got Emily Yates to do some consultancy for us last year, and we paid her £600, and that was to really give us a bit of extra backup around the work around the bus powers consultation, which was such a critically important one. So we thought that was a really good use of money. You'll see we spent £688 on the campaign animations, which Suze Riley did for us, a campaign member. And she did that at a much reduced rate, I have to say. And so she did a lot of the work that she put into that was done as a donation to the campaign. And we were really lucky to have her talents and time donated to us. The cost of the rickshaw bus is down there as an expenditure in the last year. And I think we should also note our thanks to Bob Hamilton for all the time that he spent with me down at Glasgow Green building the bus, and for all the time he's taken out in all weathers. It was Bob who pedalled the bus during the big COP climate march. So I think we should say thanks to Bob at this point. We took out shares in the Glasgow Community Energy company last year, and we also had some other sundry expenses as well. So you can see that our closing balance was again really healthy, and we are, really fortunate to have that amount of money to think about how we can put to best use. I think that this year, when we're actually able to do a lot more public work, it's really important the income that we get from members. Our monthly income was around £220 a month last year, and it's just so important, and it makes us sustainable as a campaign and allows us to do all the things that we're able to do. So I think I'll just close there, and if anyone's got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, Susan. There was a message put in the chat about how to pay subs by cheque or info for bank transfer. I don't know if that's something we are allowed to put on chat, but if we are, it might be an idea.
I'll answer Derek directly.
Oh, great, thanks, Susan. Much appreciated. And then moving on. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So now we're going to move on to the approval of committee members for 2022. So yeah, we've got 5 people who have signed up to become committee members, which is brilliant. We can have a total of 14. So actually getting a good amount of new blood is quite important and exciting as well. So we're very excited to welcome Connor Black, Andrew Fry, Andy Manning, Radine Moncrief, and Katie Thompson. So welcome, thanks very much. But unfortunately, that does also mean that we are losing some of our members, well, not members, but committee members. And we want to say a big special thank you to Miles Grant and Callum Cook. They've been in since 2019, but unfortunately now the time has come for them to move on. But we just appreciate everything they've done for us. And also thank you to Jill Bunyan and Flick Monk, who joined last year and then now leaving us as well. So if we can have the next slide. So I don't know if people are used to doing reactions on Zoom, but in terms of asking you to vote, I'm going to ask if you can raise your hand at the bottom where it says reactions to approve the motions, the 3 motions all together. We're just going to vote to approve all of them in one go, just to save us a bit of time. So that's our campaign activities that we've been discussing, the accounts we've just gone through, and then the management committee and the new members coming on board. So this means that everyone has a chance to do that. So if you just raise your hand now, we can count that. Thank you. I think that looks like everybody. Which is great. Definitely the majority. So no, that's great. Thank you so much, everybody. So those motions are passed. And then that's it, I think. Yeah, so just to ask those committee members, the new committee members who are actually on today, if you wouldn't mind just staying behind a little bit, we are going to discuss the dates for next meetings. But just wanted to say thank you, a huge thank you to everyone for joining us today and giving us your time. We really do appreciate it. Great to have your feedback and your input and to see how enthusiastic everybody is, because it really just drives us as well. So it is greatly appreciated. And thank you for joining us.
And see you on Saturday.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sorry, see you on Saturday on the 9th. Well, I won't be there, but everyone else will be.
Please come
Saturday,
along.
Please do come along.
Cheers, everybody.
Okay,
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Cheers, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much.